Welcome to my next video on the topic of water cooling. My plan for today is to replace this water block, which you can see basically just covers the CPU, with a newer version, this bad boy, that you can tell covers not only the CPU but also the VRMs around the CPU. And I wanted that actually on the day I first built this system, but it just wasn't available at the time. It didn't come out till several months later. Now I've picked one up, knowing that I have to pick one up sooner or later because the motherboard, this is a Crosshair 8 Hero, has been out for a while. It's going to get replaced with something pretty soon, and so I have to get that water block before they just don't bother making them anymore. So what I'll be replacing is these VM heat sinks here with that actual CPU block. It's going to require me to rerun a couple of the tubes here, because on this water block, the input and the output can be reversed. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. On the water block that I'm about to get, the input is actually on this side. Excuse me, I think I got it backwards. Yeah, the input is actually on that side, and the output is actually on this side. So this is actually going in right now, it's going out, and it travels down my loop and into the radiator, into the input side of the radiator, which also has an input and output. This is the output side, and that runs down into the reservoir right here. So it comes out of the reservoir after having been cooled from the radiator, goes into the GPU, and then goes out and back in. So I'm going to have to make this pipe actually run over here, and this one actually run over here. And I can see with the riser and things, it's not going to be too hard to get a pipe that gets around what this one's doing. The trick is going to be getting this pipe in over there. And I can tell that the CPU is, the actual inlet and outlet holes are a little bit wider apart, so even these pipes, even if they had been reversed, I would have to still change this pipe and that pipe, or tube, because just the fact that this is going to be the input into the water block and this is the outlet from the water block. This mount on this case is a standard TV mount. I think it's 200 millimeter VESA mount, so any TV mount works. The thing to keep in mind though is this system weighs, way before I changed this CPU block, 56 pounds. I think this CPU block is going to add another couple pounds to it, because it is a very hefty piece of equipment. Okay, and it does have, okay, so I won't have to take the motherboard off, but I am going to have to take the bracket off. Okay, so looks like I can easily get to this. You can see the brackets, I mean, they have to be to some degree the same, but you can see it's quite a bit heftier. Has to be. It's the one that's on there probably weighs, it may weigh a pound, but this definitely weighs several pounds. So it doesn't surprise me if the bracket's a little bit bigger and heavier. So I'm going to have to take this off to get to that. But the first thing I'm going to do is drain the system. I can drain it out. But I have a nice clean jug down here ready to go. I'm going to hook up a hose to it and start draining the system out. Taking off the stop plug. Make sure this is closed, which it is, it's closed. Take off the stop plug, which you don't have to use, but I recommend it because it's a good safety measure. Then I can just hook up a flex tube. Just a piece of flexible hosing with a regular 1/4 barb on it. Get it good and tight. All right. not trying to be coy or anything. It's basically just put a tube down in a bottle. I'm going to open up the valve. And if it's typical, not a whole lot's going to happen because it's got basically there's a vacuum on the system. It's a closed loop. They call it open loop, but if you're doing it right, it's actually closed. I need to relieve the pressure off by taking out the little drain plug that's on about top of here. But I've created myself a little bit of a problem because I put these two fans on to blow air across the top of the motherboard to take off any excess heat that it's generating. And I had one, and that was fine, but I realized I could fit another one in here and get a little more airflow out of it, which is fine, except now that it's actually blocking me getting into this plug. So I'm going to have to actually take this screw out and slide that over just so I can get to the top of the reservoir to hit the drain plug. And that's not a big deal. If you're afraid to tinker with systems, you probably shouldn't mess with water cooling in the first place. So it's the sort of thing I spend almost as much time playing with it, just rebuilding it, as I do actually playing games on it. Okay, it was about this point that I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get to that plug without taking the fans completely off. And rather than move the camera around and show you how I get the cables out of the cable tie downs and the cable clamps on the back, I just sped the video up a little bit and saved you the trouble of seeing me pull a couple of cables off the top of the motherboard. Okay, carefully pull those out because I really don't feel like having water fly everywhere. All right. And that is it. Now I just have to remember to put it back in before I button everything back up. Came with the reservoir. It's just a little tiny hex wrench. It's perfect for this because it's kind of sits back in here. Okay, so in order to give you an action shot, I will pan down and break this seal. You can actually hear it. At least I can hear it. And okay, that could be more dramatic, I suppose, but there's some. As you can tell, it's still draining. This happened to be a bottle I had distilled water in, so it turns out to be perfect for this job. Since it was basically used for water, now it's going to have more water. Okay, so you can hear, or maybe you can't, I'm not quite sure. At least I can hear it's draining, but you can see there's a lot of it. It's just not draining. These tubes, basically, the tube up in here, this tube doesn't drain, none of the water comes out of here, and really this is still full of liquid. Pretty much all that drained was just what's in the reservoir. So what I'm going to have to do is, basically I have to tilt the system and do a few other things to get it to work. Got a little bit more of fluid out of the system. It's still got quite a bit in it. Now I'm going to do my more unconventional method of getting the water out, which is to blow it out. One thing I've had a thought of is there are pressure testing systems for pressure testing the hoses, and I think they would do the same job without introducing any kind of contaminants that humans have. But again, I've done this several times with this system and I haven't had an issue. So what I'm going to do is put the stop back in on the top, loosen this hose, this tube, going to take it out. Okay, that's the O-ring for it. So I'm going to take this tube out. Okay, already got it loose. Basically, I'm going to, okay, very carefully and gently wiggle it. And you can see, as soon as I did that, a whole bunch more fluid came out because there's more than one lock in the system as far as airlock. Okay, so that drained this tube, this tube, this tube, but it didn't get everything, and especially didn't get things out of the radiators. I don't recommend anyone do this, but I found it to be the only way I can actually get a good amount or almost all of the fluid out of the system. When I'm done, I don't see any more fluid coming out of anything. So what I do is I've got this tube loose. This is on, very important because I'm about to blow air through it. I don't want anything shooting out of that hole. I want everything coming out down through the drain plug. So let me tilt just a tiny bit. So I just have another one of these hoses. It's got a stop on one end, but I'm not really using that for anything other than to blow into. So I'm going to put the hose right on top of that inlet. Basically just press it up against there. And I'm going to do that a couple of times. If I'm a real nice person, I will edit out that noise, or at least silence it. Okay, I think that gets most of it out of the radiator. By the way, blow, do not swallow. I don't know that this water is toxic, but I don't think I want to find out. So I'm also going to blow into this hose. What that does is basically gets the water out of the CPU block, which is important if you're going to replace it. It came pretty close. What I can do, I still see that there is a little tiny bit of water down the bottom of this block. Once I've laid it flat, I can take that off, cap these two things, make sure that I don't get any fluid on it. This block's going away, but I want to make sure I don't get fluid out. Okay, I've now retrieved myself some distilled water. And basically I've got it hiding back here. I'm going to wet this O-ring, put a little bit in here on that O-ring, and push. I'm going to be replacing this tube anyway, but it's not going in as easy as I would like. Let's put a little more water on it. There we go. You can feel when it sets in. There's a stop in there that keeps it from going in too far. And these, you just finger tighten these. It's true for all the fittings in the system. They're all just finger tight everywhere. Okay, so after saying I didn't remember how I got the water out of this thing, I actually did remember. And I'm pretty glad I didn't film that because I think I would this isn't supposed to be a comedy hour. So basically what it requires me to do is to lift this whole system up over my head, hold it over my head, and then actually kind of tilt it backwards behind my head so that it's kind of facing downward, and then kind of rock it back and forth until it basically drains out. And I got almost everything out of here. I can still see a little bit of blue, but I'm not too worried about that. This looks completely empty. That's good. I think the radiator is pretty well set to go. So the next thing is I need to take off this tube, this block, and I might take out the memory and a couple other things just for safekeeping while I'm just get it out of my road while I'm working on it for nothing else. Wow, these are nice and tight. But again, they're only finger tight. That one I haven't had off since the day I first put it on a year ago, so it's really tight. Okay. All right. Take off the So take off these pieces. Same thing here, take off this piece. I'm not going to be needing this plastic again, I don't think. This one only goes from here to here, so it's a short run. It's kind of wow, those are on there tight. More than I would have expected. All right, so pull that back a little bit. Pull the O-ring back a little bit. And in case you're wondering, these are all Bitspower fittings, although you might be able to tell it just from the logo. Okay. Okay, came right up. Again, same thing on this side, just take off the two pieces. Okay, this fitting, I'm going to go ahead and take it out for now. I'm going to replace it with the Bitspower fitting. And that's just so while I'm doing things, no dirt gets in here. Okay, there's that one. Okay, and I'm not 100% sure what fittings I'm going to need on the new water block. Okay, take out the memory sticks. And my motherboard, they go in 2 and 4. If you only have 2. These openers on both ends. It only has it on the one end. Okay. These GPUs or CPUs can actually pull out of their sockets rather than coming loose because the thermal interface material has dried out. Mine's only been on for a year, and I use Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut. What I'm hoping is that mine will come off easy. If not, what I'm going to do is take a heat gun to it, warm it up a little bit, although I can kind of feel parts of it already. Okay, one of these, of course, the screw came out of the motherboard. This one, fortunately, the screws come out of the motherboard, and I don't seem to be able to get enough oomph behind it to make it stay, so that's okay. Won't stop me from getting it off of there. See, that screw was supposed to stay in the motherboard. Wow, it's really tight. No wonder it didn't stay. So what I'm going to try doing is get everything off except for that. And then, oh, that one actually, the washer came off too. This one it did not. Okay. So this is on there. There shouldn't be anything else holding this on here. It's just being held on by the thermal paste. And it's really hard. Oops. By the way, backplate not being held on by anything now fell off. Okay, so back plate with some mylar on it. Back plate just had some mylar on it to keep it from insulation. Okay, so this is much tighter. Yeah, that's not even budging, not even a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to try is heating it up with a heat gun, and the same heat gun I use for the tubing, and see, or to bend tubing, and see if that warms it up enough to make it easy to get off. All right, let's try this again. Let's see if this makes that same noise. That was pretty horrendous. Okay, well, I don't know if you can hear me over the noise, but it is getting loose. Yeah, that's definitely the way to go. Wow. Okay, that thing's like I got power off now. Okay, so that, I don't know what that was. I'll have to go back and look at the tape and see how long the tape, yes. That shows my age. I'll have to go back and look at the video recording and see how long it took. But it was about 5 minutes or something. It got everything off. That was not moving until I heated it up. So that is a definite tip for people. If you're trying to remove the heatsink, heat it up a little bit. A hairdryer would probably do just as well. But since I have a heat gun anyway, wow, I got some crap on that. Hopefully, a good thing it's non-conductive. I'm going to need to lay this down, clean it all up. My first thing was just to get everything off, and that worked out really well. So you can see it's pretty well done. Now I will get some isopropyl alcohol. I have some like 92 or 94%. Good stuff for cleaning this up. I'm going to also want to take off these VRM heat sinks. So I will. That's kind of my next step. Maybe I'll try the heat sinks now while I still have it setting up, because the screws for those are the 4 screws, I believe, on the back. So I'm going to use they're kind of small screws. I don't want to lose any of these pieces parts, because someday I may want to use this on motherboard in a water-cooled system, and in that case I want these VRMs back on the motherboard. Okay, that's 2. Take off this bottom one down here so I can hold on to this thing. So I'm not sure what holds it on after you take the screws out, if anything. Three. And 4. Okay, so is anything holding this heat? Oh, actually, I guess I was worried for nothing. I forgot. There's still tape on this. They're not going to fall off. Okay, so with those 4 screws removed, what I'm trying to get off is this band. It's actually all one piece. There's a heat pipe, which I didn't know until just now. there's a heat pipe, yeah, that connects the two pieces. And there we go. Oh, well, I lost one tiny piece of thermal tape. That's okay. It's a pretty hefty piece of metal with a pipe in between, connect the two pieces together. Okay, so I need to clean off basically this old block, these thermal pads, well, basically, and the CPU itself. And so I have some isopropyl alcohol, microfiber cloth. I like using microfiber cloths because paper towels work, but they tend to leave crap behind, so then I'm having to clean that off somehow. These I use, like you can get them real cheap now, so I just use them, throw them away. Wow, I am really surprised how dry that thermal paste actually is. Okay, cleans right off though. I shouldn't complain too much. So gets everywhere. Okay, so that cleaned up really well. That tape kind of got everywhere. I see the little, you can see like little white spots on them. That's thermal tape that still needs to be cleaned off. Yeah, it's better. I'm not too worried about getting it down in the nooks and crannies, but I want to get the tops off, cleaned off, because I'm about to put more thermal tape on, and I want it to bond. It's still really putty-like, but it wasn't stuck to my chip quite so much. It's mostly just to clean off the old gunk so I can put more, just as much extra new gunk on it. Hopefully I don't get quite so much on it. It really is very much like silly putty. I'm surprised. Okay, let's get over here. Got a little carried away. You're supposed to just coat the top, but I must have got too much of a coating, and then when I put the actual screws to it, I mean literally screwed down the top of the heatsink or the water block onto the CPU, it spread it out and squished it over onto the sides, and that was that. I really don't have any reason to take the chip out of the socket, so I am not going to. I have not had any trouble with it running. Just wanted the VRM to cool down a little bit more. So now I want to do a test fit and see how this thing looks on there. And that's the one that I had on there. Little difference. Let's take it out. Man, this thing's heavy. It weighs a ton. Wow. This is pretty. Okay. Okay, this does have, because it has built-in RGB, so I do have an RGB cable that I'm going to have to run to. That's okay. The top of this motherboard has a bunch of RGB connectors, in addition to fan connectors. Oh, that's right there over here. Now I have to find out which one of the types of RGB it is. It goes. Correct. There's the two things, right? Don't drop them on here. Oh, I see what that. I wondered why there was a pigtail right here on this. Let's see if I can just get it down in there. Get this out of the road too. There's a pigtail that sticks out right here, and I couldn't figure out why. It's actually what the screw screws into, so you need it. Okay, notice this has a flow indicator, which my old system didn't have. Wow. Well, I'm not going to have any problem getting it in. My problem is going to be making sure I don't drop it down too soon, because it's going to have thermal tape on it, and that's not much clearance. Now what they gave me to go on this is three thermal pads, one of which I'm supposed to cut in half, and some other various pieces. The rest of the pieces are for mounting. I'm not going to use their thermal pads. I got Chronot pads instead, but I will need to, of course, use their mounting screws. So I'll need those. I'll need their instructions, which I have, but I don't have. So I have 2 Allen wrenches, a set of screws, and some sort of insulators, it looks like. Tiny plastic washers. This screws in completely from the back. There is nothing that screws in from the front. These 4 screws screw in from the back. These tiny screw holes screw also into the back, and that's what holds the VRM down. I need to put the thermal pads across here and here, and also here, and then thermal paste on the CPU that'll contact this area, for which I've already taken off the sticker that it said to take off. Okay, so step 1, I think, is to put on the back pad. Well, this came assembled in this order, but the directions actually indicate that it goes this way. It's an interesting cutout right here. I'm not sure what that's for. The other side doesn't have one. Okay, apparently they gave me enough of the little gummy washers that they go on every single one of the pads. Each one of these posts, each one of these posts. So for a total of 8, there is just enough of everything, like a fine German company would do. So I have the installation instructions. I don't think you can see that. They're right here. They don't say much, but they say enough, I guess. But there's enough there for me to get the general gist of the order of things and where the notch goes and that sort of thing. So that's really what I needed. There we go. All right. This is probably why it squished all over the side, because I think I found it really hard to get it even. But this stuff does not recommend like some where you put this drop in the middle. This is definitely, so they give you this applicator, they expect you to kind of spread it out yourself. So I'm doing that. I found out my tip, I guess if I had any tip, would be start one direction, get it kind of done, and then switch directions or change to a different side so that you're pulling it towards you always. Trying to put on a little bit less than I did last time, because obviously I got too much on because it was squirted all over the side. Still kind of looks like I'm getting too much on. Okay, that's good for that part. Thermal pads. What I have to do is put it between these two spots. I think it goes from probably from here to here, and also a layer goes up here. So what you do is one of these goes on here, and then you cut one of these in half to put it up here. At least that's what I'm guessing. Okay, and do they go between the two dashes? Yes, they do. Okay, so there is, I don't know if it can be seen on here, there are notches. At least on that one there are. And that one covers the whole thing. So I'm guessing that's what it is. This one covers the whole thing. This one goes only over the notches. Although it looks like I could probably cover the whole thing and get away with it. Let me see their others. I use it for layout. And then they expected to cut 1 in half for the upper layer, which is reasonable. Okay, you still have to notch. You still overlap just a little bit, so you'd still have to notch one of them out to get it to fit. Then cut one of them out in half, cut the remaining one in half. The idea is to cut to fit. Apply them. I'm going to have to hold the system up and then peel those off, put that on all in one kind of fell swoop. That's going to be fun. Kind of have to get it right the first time because there's really not a second time. All right, got one. I think I have the trick. The trick is to bend them and then try and keep them off your own fingernails. Okay, so they go on each one of these posts. Gets one for all 8 posts. And since I have paid good money, I might add, for a little bit extra, I will use a little tiny bit extra. So all right. This is one of the base units, so peel it off. I think I'm going to use this one for here. Okay, get it nice and flat. Now the other one, which would go here, overlaps slightly, and you wouldn't want that. So I would notch this out just a little tiny bit on the one that I cut. Okay, again, line these up. It's a handy guide. Okay. I wonder if this is Bitspower approved method of getting these things off. Here's cutting them with a pair of scissors. He didn't say I couldn't. On the other hand, he didn't actually say I could. Okay, so I need a notch that's about a little bit less than a quarter inch in for a little less than a half an inch. So these will squish a little tiny bit. So I'm going to go with that by that. Let's see how I did. Yeah, it's almost like I know what I'm doing sometimes. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay, so I'll peel that one off. At least these peel off. I may not be able to get the other things off, but these peel pretty nice. On the other hand, like I said, they're $10 a piece. They should peel really nice. Okay, let's get that in there in the right spot. Use both hands if necessary. Nice. Okay, almost looks professional. Okay, the last one, same length as the other ones, but I have to cut it in half because you can tell these are narrow. All right, so let's see this again. So is that truly this length I need? Yeah, it does seem to be, doesn't it? How about this side? Yeah, that'll work. All right. Line these up again. And then use the magical scissors. This time I think I will cut it right on the line. Doesn't seem to be a lot of play up there. Now I need to cut it in half. I need a nice way to cut it in half and actually get it in half. Do I trust myself to get it right? Probably not. Let's see, and I don't have a lot of these to cut. Okay, that's not bad. So 2 pieces. Right length. Peel. Now I just got to remember to peel all those pieces back before I try to mount this thing. Yes. Missed a tiny hair. And I should have just enough slop that I don't need to miss anything. All right. Don't pull. Don't want to stretch it. Okay. Good, 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 good. Okay, that covers the whole thing. It even sticks out just a tiny bit, so I'm sure I'm going to get 100% coverage, which is better than the heat sinks I took off. They were not 100% covering things, at least not the lower choke ones. The upper ones were pretty good. But the lower ones and lower choke just weren't thick enough. I think they actually accidentally grabbed one of the wrong size pad, thermal tape that they were using. Okay. Yeah, seems like I got this one a little long. Let's peel it back off. I don't think I got it a little long. I just didn't get it started in the right spot. Did it again. Let's try. It needs to butt up right against the washer, apparently. Or the post. Nope, now I got a little bit off to the side. Okay, let's do this one more time. I'll flip it around and put the factory edge on the outside so people can't see how badly I cut. There you go. I got it that time. Yeah, it's better. That one just fits. All right, so I'm all set. From this side, I need to peel and then put it in place. This side's ready to go, but I want to make sure I only get that gooped in the first try. To determine that this is, based on the instructions, this is the order, and that the notch goes down towards the front of the motherboard. I'll lift it up the motherboard in a minute and see if I can figure out why that is. There's probably something that's going around. And this does come off. Okay, now which way does it face? I would assume it doesn't matter since it's just an insulator. So I am going to put it on the rubber pad like so. Okay, so now it's not going to come off. Still don't know what this notch is for though, but the instructions show there being a notch, and the notch heads away from the corner of the VRM, so that forms of now the notch goes down. I'm going to assume I'll figure out why here in a minute. The question I was having is, why is there a notch heading down? Well, I think it is, some of these resistors, I assume those are resistors, maybe capacitors, those tiny little parts probably protrude up just a little bit. So it's sort of a, I guess I could probably do it without the thing here. It's probably just a safety net. And it's really, just, I can't see any reason for it, to be honest. But that's where it goes, so seems to be plenty of room. It's got a notch. It's got a direction for the notch. I'm going to do what the direction says. I don't know why, but I'm going to, because that's what the direction says. So, and I'm going to be happy about it. Okay, so peeling number 2. And if I can get it from this side, I'll try getting it from this side. Number 3. Sorry, I have to hold it a little close for me to see where this thing starts. So I'm kind of taking it off camera for a second so I can get it close to my eyes. And number 4. All right. So I've got them all peeled off. That's pretty tacky. I need to line up the 2 screws up here, screw here, these 4 screws, and a screw over there. And I need to do it without dropping this on my head. It's in place. Let's see if I can get this done. I'm going to be concentrating more on this than whether the camera shot is good, so let's just hope it is. I do have it the right way. Okay. The clearance is pretty tight. Okay. Now the trick is to hold it in place. Wow, that lines up pretty nicely, I must say. You can actually thumb tighten those screws in, or finger tighten those screws in. Wow. Okay, I think I got it shot in one shot. Pretty impressed. Won't tighten them up all the way because I need to get all 8 screws in. It wiggles just a little bit. It's probably all I want it to wiggle. Spread a little bit of that lovely ferrule cronut. Wow, there's not a lot of play in that. But again, I guess if you pay that kind of money for a block, it should work. I have the 4 outer screws semi-screwed in, not all the way, because I want to make sure I get these 4 screwed in, the 2 that go here, 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 and that's what I'm about to do now. And one of my big problems with metrics is they are so easy to get. Threads are so fine, it's very easy to get them in wrong, get them started wrong, strip the threads. In general, I like the fine threadness because they give you a lot of adjustment on the tightness of the screw, but that took longer than expected, but now I have all 8 screws installed and tightened down. Okay, and this is what it looks like mounted. It's pretty, I guess. Again, one of the issues I'm going to have is I need to get this that's out, the flow out of the GPU. I need it to be the flow into this guy. I actually could reverse it because this card actually either end can be input, either end can be output, as long as you can see they have connections to the front. They even have one on the back. You can use any of these three, but you have to use one from each side. So I could run it into here and out from back here, into here and out from back here, into here and out from here, just as long as it makes the water go through the entire card. Okay, so I have this RGB wire, and I think I can route it down behind. Yeah, I can. And route it down behind the memory to figure out how I'm going to get it to stay there. That I don't know offhand. And run it out this. I'll need you to move for just a second, then you can hog the room back up again. Okay. All right, where'd it go? It's underneath the cable. All right, I will push it on through. Yep, there it is. I come out here. And just happen to have the appropriate connector right here that I wasn't using for anything, so I need it. Problem is this is getting pushed down a little bit. It should be up higher. So while I'm already at it, and I got tubes out, I've got all my stuff for cutting and grinding and such. Maybe I should just go ahead and fix this. This one's not broken, so that's probably a bad idea. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see how far we are from. I'm sure I measured this before. Okay, to the edge is about 68 millimeters. Yeah. Well, what do I want to measure to? Probably let's measure to the center. If I measure to the center, it's almost exactly 75 millimeters. So I need to do that on this. Yeah. So it's like the 10. Now once it sinks in, once I screwed it in, it should be about perfect. Okay. Oops. There's it. Always go the tight way when you're trying to use the 90 degrees, because you want it to tighten, not loosen. Okay. Good. Alrighty. That looks pretty good. It's nice and straight. It's even with that guy. Okay, so this water block added, I think that's 7.5 millimeters. All right, so I need, this is the pipe I'm working on, so it goes from this spot of the radiator now to what the inlet, to the outlet over here, which is this side now. So as you can see, it's a little short. It's really not bad for height. If I had it in there, let's see. Nope, that would be fine for height. I want to take a little bit off of this one, maybe about 1/4 of an inch. So I need to get my tools out. What I'm going to do is take this one off, replace it with its correct one, which is this one, or one like it. They're both exactly alike. Come on. There we go. Okay. One on the motherboard, or one on the water block. Okay, now what I need is a hose that comes out of here, zigzags, and then comes in there. That's going to be kind of a fun little hose to make. First thing, I want to cut this tube down a little bit. Essentially the same cutter you use for cutting copper pipe, except it's for plastic pipe. So you turn it a little bit, go a little bit tighter. Ooh, I might want to go a little easier when I'm doing that. I've done this for a while, so forget how much pressure this takes. So you rotate, you keep rotating. So basically you're rotating it. Every so often you crank this down just a little bit, so it cuts a little bit deeper. And if you keep it up in these wheels nicely, it will cut a nice even cut in there. It's getting close. You can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it. You can hear it tinking a little bit as it starts to cut through the plastic all the way. So then it's little tiny turns on the pressure. Because the more time you take here, the less time you spend sanding and using the tool to deburr it. And I'd much rather spend time doing this. Get a nice even. Yeah, even for me, this is taking a little longer than I usually would. It's getting loose though, so I'm starting to get through. Yeah, I'm getting there. I haven't done this for almost a year or so. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that didn't come off as pretty as I'd like, but it's not too bad. Now it needs to be sanded and deburred and stuff, so that's one part. Deburring, this is one of the few tools out of the kit that I actually use, which is a deburring tool. It does both sides. Basically, it does this. I know a couple of people said they didn't like this tool, but I think their issue was I think they were cranking too hard. It's really, especially with, this is a pretty thin tube. It's really a pretty light touch. I'm trying to get the inside and the outside deburred. This does the outside. I actually don't usually spend much time on the outside. The outside is not what tends to be the problem. It's the inside that doesn't cut cleanly because of the way that tool works. Okay, and then my little trick, I get one of these 3M sanding blocks. You can see the circles on it, and I literally just and that seems to do a really nice job taking off the end. Okay, so I'm going to take the tube that I just cut the little piece off of, put it in the soapy water, just to make sure that the end of it's nice and clean. Now I'm going to test fit this one back in. Luckily it's nice and wet. It's not sagging nearly as much now. So that tube looks much better. Okay, so the trick I'm trying to figure out is if I can reuse this piece of hose, or this piece of tube, to go from here. I need it to go from here and then down into here. So I actually need it to bend twice. That's going to be a tricky one. Don't know if this one's going to do it for me or not, but let's give it a shot. So one of the things, I'm sure it's going to be fun to hear over there, but one of the things that surprised me about this tubing, probably because it's so thin, is it really doesn't take very long for it to melt. Yeah. Welcome back. Fast forward about 2 days. I was just in the middle of getting ready to start to make the tube that runs from this top here, has to come up, come over a slight bit, and then run into here, when my heat gun decided to seize up and die and generate smoke and everything except for flame. and I have replaced it with a new heat gun. Thank you, Amazon Prime, for next day delivery. I actually got to make a tube that goes from this spot over to the inlet here on this radiator tube, but that actually is a much easier tube. It's just a straight tube with a couple of bends. Okay, so after a couple of tries, I'm going to get a fresh, straight piece of tube that I haven't used before. Marked a mark on here. I measured that I want the apex of the bend coming out of the video card at 55 millimeters. So that means that the apex of this bend should be there. I'm going to go the whole length because I kind of want it to be nice and supple. And stay about a half an inch to an inch farther away from the gun tip. So I think I'm heating it up just a little too fast. That's what's causing the bubbles. Yeah. Alright, it's already starting to bend. Okay. I got the apex of the bend just about exactly where I want it. I need it to be 90 degrees. That's about 90 degrees. Trying to look at it. Now I'm just kind of letting it cool. Be careful not to push too hard. You can actually kind of get a negative bend in it if you're not careful. It's getting there, starting to firm up. Takes a couple minutes to get supple, takes a couple minutes to harden up. Until I do that, I kind of try and keep it a little bit more than 90. So it's not quite 90 degrees, it's more like 89 or something. So as you can see, when you let go, it flexes back out. So it's still a little over. Let's see if I can figure out how much. A few degrees, actually. So what I'm going to do is put it down here on the table so I can line up the straight edges. Kind of just hold it in place. Okay. That's pretty close. It's a little too high here. My first test fit, I can see that this is rising a little bit above it, but I can always cut a tiny bit off of this tube to make it go down. So the trick is to make it, make this bend where I need it to, which is really close to right about here. Now what I think I'm going to do is rather than try and bend a 90 right here, I'm going to let the tube essentially run a little bit this direction, and then put the bend about right here. And then make it sort of not a 90, but a maybe a 135 on the outside bend. So essentially like that. So it's coming up at an angle, and it bends straight in. And again, because I have plenty of tube to work with here, I just need to get the bend right at the right spot. And then as far as getting the length in there, I can do that by cutting it to get it to the right length. I just need to get the bend at the right place. So I'm going to need a couple of marks on this. One is because I'm looking down at this. I'm looking straight down from above. I'm seeing a 90 down here. I need this bend to start right about here, but I need this section to be up on the top because I want this 90 to still stay straight up and down because that's what I'm working with. So I'm going to mark that. And I need to actually back off a little bit. Okay. Alright, so I want this to stay on the upside. And I want my 135, I guess according to this is a 135. to bend here. So it should be in this should be the area. It's not much of a bend. So fortunately, I am not getting these marks to show up on this camera because it shows up too. So I need this part to stay up on top. This is the apex of my bend. This is kind of where the bend starts and ends. 135 isn't much of a bend, so that is the trick. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the corner here so I can kind of line up with my 90 hanging down where I want that to go, because I want this to be kind of in the middle. So I can line this up and then kind of push along the side there. And I've got a mark for where the top should be. Okay. See if I can get my bend in it. Got the 90, I'm holding it down so I can kind of feel where the 90 is. I may have overshot just a little bit, but that's easily fixed. What I don't have is any bubbles or any nastiness in the tube itself. Okay, so here's kind of the final product. It has a 90 degree here. Turn it the other way. It has a close to 135 there. It should be, when I look at it this direction, this should be kind of even. It's close. It's not 100%, but I can get it to work. The idea is that I'm going to put it in this section here, twist it slightly so that it's not running straight. It's going to actually run at an angle like this. And then at this length of this tube will actually go in here at some point. Now what I'm going to have to do is take this out and do some cutting to see where things go. But I think I've got a workable tube at this point, which is good. So now I'll pull this back out. Take another look at the tube, see if it looks decent. It's got water in it, but yeah, all the little parts. I guess reusing tubes just isn't, well, it's, at least plastic is not worth it. Tubes are the cheapest part anyway. They just don't seem to reheat and reform as well as I'd like. So again, the idea is to go from this tube to that one. Yeah, a little water on that. And why I've got a whole tub of water here, so why I would try and put this in dry, I don't know. Oh, it doesn't want to go in there. Let me put some water inside the... Get these O-rings wet so that they let it slide a little bit better. Still not really. I'm going to force it because I don't want to ruin the O-ring. Ah, there it goes. So I need to cut this section right here. I'm not sure to what length, but I know not to cut it too short. I need to cut it to the right length. I'm going to cut it pretty long. I know it's going to be way too long, but better too long than too short. And then I can put that hose in and work my way back to get everything lined up properly. So let's cut it too long, stick it in there, and then I can start whittling it down until I figure out exactly where to put it. Okay, I'm going to cut way back from where I need to be. All right. Okay. Make sure it's, when you use one of these, that it's on the rollers up in here, these rollers. And then really, you just tighten it a little bit and turn. And if you got it in the rollers right, it will cut itself perfectly. Don't go too fast. Don't try to do too much at once. It's not a speed race, kind of an endurance race. And that's for PET tubing. I've never used acrylic glass tubing yet. I suspect that's a bit of a different cutting experience. This is easy to work with. One thing I would do if I had this to do again, I would use much thicker tubing. I went with thin, thinking it would be easier to work with, but I'm actually kind of convinced it's not easier to work with. I think it might actually be harder. It all works the same in the end. As long as enough water flow is going on, it doesn't really matter what size the tube is. As long as you're getting sufficient water flow through the system and it's getting the heat's getting dumped out of your radiator fast enough, you could put it through a pencil straw. As long as you're getting enough water movement. I don't recommend trying that. Okay, getting pretty close here. I hear it? Okay. Okay, that last one's always a bit of a challenge. The burring tool will take it off anyway. So, all right. So this is the tube section that I want to keep. Deburr tool. That's on this one. Actually the outside is just as important because it's actually going in an O-ring, so I have to make sure that's good. Inside's good though too. Okay, and we'll dip it in some water. Dip a little water in this O-ring. Get a little water on the end of this hose. Pop it in. And see what I've got. Okay, it overshoots by quite a bit. I need to move it back and down. I have a feeling I'm going to need to, I really need this to do its thing. Yeah, I need to go back and get this hose to do that a little sooner, like a lot sooner. Okay, so I put this tube back in because I need to make this, the marks are here, kind of almost rubbed them off, but I need this to be right about this direction. So I need my China pencil so I know where. I need it going in about here. Yeah. So it kind of goes back to straight pretty easy. There we go. Now it's plenty supple. Now I just got to get the angle right. It's still not bent where I need it to be though. Yeah, maybe this. Okay. I'm just going to hold it here till it kind of so it gets more solid. Okay, so here's what I've got now. I definitely got this bend to happen a little sooner. It's more of the bend that I needed. It offsets it just about the right amount. It might still not be enough. Take out the silicone rubber. Yeah, it's still, you can see it's overshooting, but it's bending in about the right place. So what I need to do is I need to move this bend in about right here. Alright. It looks bad, but it's because I got the angle wrong. If I get that angle right, then I can cut the length of this back here down, which will slide it over and in. But I have to get that angle right. So right now it's not quite there. So I've got to figure out what do I need. And it looks like what I need is it's bending in the right spot. It's just not bending enough yet. It needs to bend here. It's bending there. It needs to bend here. So I need to bring it in about, that's 15, 20 degrees or more. And in order to do that, I've got to get this back in. I need this link that's running this way to come in about here. So when I'm done, it should be, bending here is okay, but I need it to bend about this much so that when I put it in at this angle, it's actually going straight into the thing. So I need to get it about 10 or 15 more degrees from where I have it. That looks pretty close. You know, I can make that work. It's too long, obviously. It's too long this way, obviously. But that's a straight cut back. I am sure that would not leak. And so I'm going to go with that. It's not exactly 100% square, but it is pretty darn close. I'm going to measure this. Need to cut off about 60 millimeters to get that to move in. So I'll start with 55 or 50 just to make sure I'm close, because cuts are easy and quick. Redoing a tube is not so. Okay, so I have a mark. I have this in the rollers. Roll it. A slight turn, give it about 1/8 of a turn every time. Okay. All right. I wish these would come out even more often than they do. Got to deburr this off a little bit. Okay. This one I'm actually going to sand a little too. You can see all the little circles on here from me spinning. It does a really nice job, actually. Okay, wash this off. Exactly 10 centimeters too long, so let's cut off another 10 centimeters. Going really slow, because when you get down and you're cutting just an end off of something, you can really squish the pipe. That did not come out as well as I would like, so I'm going to see if I can get that to cut a little more. Yeah. All right, do it the old-fashioned way. All righty. To burn a little. Sounds like I'm doing a lot of work, but I'm really just barely touching it. Okay. Clean it off with some water. You can see I'm not cutting much. It's a pretty small piece. But I'm almost over there in this direction. I am really hoping the longer pipe that goes across the top is a lot easier to do. It was last time, so I suspect it will be this time too. I didn't like it too much because the 90s weren't exactly, they were 90 degrees, but one was a lot higher, wider radius than the other. Yeah. Tighten, turn, tighten some more, turn. Yeah, I'd kind of like to get this one to come off nicely. I can hear it cutting through. Ah, there we go. All right. Yeah. Got it most of the way to come off. So this is what files and things are for. Okay. Again, the trick here is to get this up against the rollers, cutting off about, this much here. So tighten it down a little bit, turn. That'll score a line really fast. Keep going. Tighten, turn, rinse, repeat. Make a sandwich. Go read the news. Go slow. All right, that came out pretty well. Got all but one tiny little piece. That's not too bad. Okay. Deburr it. Trying to make sure I'm rotating it in a nice 90-degree plane to the end of the tube so I'm not making weirdness on it. So this should be just about correct. Okay. All right. That's not bad. That's actually not bad at all. You put on each end, O-ring, oops, sorry, compression fitting, Bitspower compression fitting. So they're deluxe versions. These come in two pieces, the top part and the bottom part. This compression fitting fits up against the tube and makes it nice and tight. So put a little water on the O-ring. Again, it's a good idea if you put the compression fitting on first and then the O-ring. Okay, so now I have a tube ready to go. There we go. There we go. The remaining tube is the one that goes from here up over the memory, so I can get to the memory without having to drain my system, and down into this one. So step one, get a 90 right here. Gonna eyeball it. That's because that's worked out so well for me so far today. So what I'm going to do is make sure it's longer than I need to be. I'm going to put the bend up here above this so that I know it's writing too high, and then it's a matter of cutting off some end here to get it to the right length. That I can work with. And where's my mark? That's right there. This is both factory edges, essentially, so I shouldn't have any trouble getting this tube in, and I'm not. Okay, in this case, I am going to grab the 90, which I seem to have misplaced. It's amazing how easily this goes in when the tube is brand new. Yeah, it's nice and supple now. So the trick is to find my 90 and to bend this along it. And this time I actually am going to try and use their 90. The issue I found with it is when I let go, it's not 90 anymore. It's about 91, 92. Let's let it cool off, see what happens. Theoretically, this should give you a nice 90 every single time. I measured 13 inches away from the outer edge of this 90. Okay, so it needs to go into here. From here, I've got this length, and you can see the 90. Wow, that really is over. I'm going to have to unflex that a little bit and get it back into 90. That's a little too much. So I need the bend to start about, it looks like, you can kind of tell if I stop kicking the camera, that it takes, using their tool, about an inch to do it. So I want that to start about here, where my thumb is. So I'm going to mark that as the top, as the apex. Okay, that's a great mark. 5 marks. Alright, let's try that again. This is why I use this. Alright, so I've got a nice dark mark. Okay, so I've got my mark. I've got this. It's more than 90. I'm actually going to have to heat this up just a little bit, let it relax just a degree or so. It's a little too harsh. Okay. Not quite. I probably don't have to do anything other than just heat it up to get it back to where I want it. Still too much. There we go. Okay, now I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. So I'm not impressed with their 90. My 90 is now a little bit more like 91, 92. All right. That 90 is more of 90. Wipe off my other mark. I'm going to do a double check on the length of that. So it should be about 13 inches to the outside edge. That's about where that's going to go if I'm right about the bending. I'll start it once, see how it goes. There's a very fine line between I'm ready to bend and not yet. And it's not there yet. It's getting there though. Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah, definitely getting there. Yep, it's going to flex even when I'm not trying to, so that's a good sign. And also a fine line between I'm ready to flex and he's melted me too much. And that's not ready yet. Okay, so I'm still trying to use their tool to get the 90. You can see I have the apex pointing right at the 90-degree center mark. Switch right there. Hold this down for a second. I suspect it'll do the same thing. Yeah, I get it overshot, and it's not quite straight, so heat it up a little bit so I can flex. Needs flexed in two directions. It's a little bit cockeyed, and it's a little twisted. This is where a flat table comes in handy. Okay, I am a lot more satisfied with that one. Wipe off the China marker marks. Now it's a matter of this really came out nice. Again, you think the longer tubes would be harder than the shorter tubes, but they're not. They're actually quite a bit easier because they have some play. So the idea is that when I'm using this tube, I want the top of this tube to be just about the top, just below at the top of this. In fact, if it lines up perfectly with these metal posts, the top of these metal posts, that is good because the plexiglass is actually raised up probably a quarter of an inch. So it gives me enough clearance that they're not hitting the glass, not vibrating, whatever. And so I need to cut off about that much. So I'm going to cut off a little less. That's about an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter to start with. Okay. This is going to be fun to cut. Okay, let's not get carried away there. All right. This one, I'm going to have to kind of run this around the tube because the tube's really long. It works either way, but I prefer spinning the tube instead of spinning this because it's really hard to keep this even. It's heavy on one end, not the other. So keep going. Tighten it ever so often. So it's definitely making a mark. It's not through yet. There we go. All right, so that end's pretty good. Let's see how close I am. Still a little high, but it's not bad. Then I don't have to deal with. I'm going to cut this side so I'm not dealing with quite so much flopping pipe. But I'm going to have to cut this one the same way as I did the other one. No, I guess not. No, I'm not working with the same amount of flop. Problem is that this end's heavy, so I'm going to have to change hands on which one I'm holding. I'm twisting the easy end. So yeah, this is probably better. Again, tube's still way too long on both ends. All right. So now I have a pipe that's way too big, but it's at least the approximate right size. So it also lets me see if I'm indeed okay. It is way too high. The left side is much higher. Well, much, yeah, good half an inch higher than the right side, but then I cut it that way for a second. So the right side needs to come down probably half an inch. Let's start with that. Half an inch off this side, or 10 millimeters if you prefer. Hang on a second. Come on. There we go. I really want you to cut it all the way off. That's kind of why I have it. All right. There's that one. This time I will deburr it just a little bit because this one should be pretty close. Okay. All right. Just wash the end of that off. Dry the end of that off. Blow that bubble out of there because I was trying to figure out what that crack was. It turns out that crack is the... Okay, that is darn near perfect. Because this pipe is heavy enough it's just pushing itself down. Well, not much. Okay. I'm going to reach it from underneath. Okay, so it's down in here a ways. So I have my mark. I can line this guy up with that mark. You can't see it, but I can, trust me. Okay. Almost took it off completely, but not quite. But I have this tool to help me with that. Out of all the things I have, I think that little purple sanding block probably does the best job of anything. Okay. Just running a little bit of soapy water through it just to clean it out, get all the crap out of the inside of it from the cut. And I think we're probably ready for a good test fit. Now it's time to put on the fittings, make sure everything's tightened up, and then start filling. Okay, this is just like the other tube. Put on the Fittings first. O-ring. Dip it in some water. I want it to be nice and supple. Put some O-ring or water on the inside of this guy. I want this to be nice and good. Same thing for the other side. Put the collar on. With the O-ring a little bit, stick it on. Okay. Wiggle a little bit, it goes in there nice and tight. Wiggle this one in there. Nice, now that really went in nice. And they should screw down. Okay. Yeah, they screw down really well. I need to go through and check to make sure all the fittings are tight again. I really didn't loosen most of them up, but they all feel really good. At this point, it's time to put the fluid back in and see if it holds water. I've got the backup power supply wired into the connectors for the pump. For whatever reason, there's two leads here, but I guess it's positive and negative lead. They're individually sleeved. That's ready to go. Now I just need to move around front, start putting some fluid in. In the front, got the BFG power supply hooked up. I have one of these 24-pin connectors that has the pin jumpered so that as soon as you apply power in the back of this guy, it thinks it's on, connected to a motherboard. But what I did was I have purchased one of these. Does the same job, jumpers that pin, except in this case it actually has an on and off switch so I can turn the power supply on and off. It lets me turn the pump on and off without having to actually reach for my hand back there. It's a little more accurate, so because as you're filling, you want to make sure this pump never runs dry, so you have to cut it off fast enough. Pretty much when it's about halfway down, cut it off so that it doesn't drain out. Fill bottle, basically just a bottle they use in any medical supply house. If you've been a patient anywhere, you've probably seen these. This is how they give you water, ice water, that sort of thing. What I want to do is pour this in, preferably carefully without spilling it. And I do have a bit left over from the fill in case I need any extra. But one thing from this is I know just about how much fluid my system takes. And so when I fill this up, I'll have a pretty good idea if I actually managed to get most of it out. It looks like, yeah, I did a fair job. So that is about what it takes. It's about this much. I'm going to add a little bit more out of this bottle just so I make sure I have plenty to work with. All right. I need my handy dandy hex wrench for opening the fill port on the top of the reservoir here. Fill port is back here, but amazing how much that screws on. All right, I am ready to put some fluid in. So now is a good time to double check, make sure you've closed all the holes, turned off all the, reconnected all the things you've disconnected, all that good stuff. I believe I have. I've checked a couple times already. So let's put some fluid in the reservoir. And from previous videos I've done, well, actually when I was doing my investigation to figure out what happened to the color of this fluid, I mentioned it takes about 2.5 with 3 reservoirs full of coolant to actually refill the system. So what I'm going to do is get down here, get my trusty switch, turn it on, turn it off. Oh, that actually shut off a lot faster. Usually I have to shut it off a good halfway down before, and it doesn't stop right away, but that time it seemed like it stopped really fast. So I don't know if that's because this is the first time I've used a switch and it actually has 3 wires, which I'm not sure if the other wire's off, perhaps. Maybe it might be like emergency power off as opposed to just on, but we'll find out. I kind of like it if that's the case. A lot easier to control how much fluid or how long this pump runs. Oh yeah, this is much better. I recommend these. Came from, like you're going to read that. CRJ Electronics. It's a 24-pin ATX red LED switch jumper cable. Conveniently toggle your ATX power supply on and off with this LED illuminated jumper cable. Really works. Before, what would happen is with the just the block, turning the power off in the back, actually turned the power off, but it still continued. After switching off, it took a bit of time for the power to actually stop completely enough that the pump stopped. Now it doesn't have that effect. It seems as soon as I flip that switch, it has stopped pumping, which I much prefer. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can get pretty close with that. Again, the trick is to not let the pump run dry. It does not appreciate it. It's basically a fluid dynamic bearing of some kind, I think. Without fluid, there is nothing that keeps the bearing from smacking against the side of the casing it's in, so it does bad things. Don't recommend doing that. And I have a loop. That's about right. I filled it up the rest of the way. I filled just about that much. I definitely wasn't necessary. Getting a little soapy in here, which I had the last time. That'll go away. It's from the leftover bubble between the bubbles in the thing and whatever residual soap was in the tubes that I just put in. It is going down. All right, so there's still a lot of air in it. This should be a nice translucent, transparent blue. It's not there. It's definitely got full of air. But so far, at least, I'm happy to report no leaking. This takes a tiny bit more fluid than the old block, but we're talking on the order of milliliters, maybe 10 or 20 more milliliters. So it will continue to get air. What I'll do is I'll run it with the port plug out, and that'll let the air escape out of the system. And it'll take about an hour for that to really get settled. Main thing was no leaks, except for, of course, where I set the bottle down and it dripped out the bottom. Okay, but pretty good shape. I finished up last night by leaving the power supply hooked up to the pump from the back. Let it pump for an hour or so. I did it again this morning for about an hour just to make sure that there were no leaks or anything. The 2 new tubes seem to be working just fine. The old tubes aren't leaking. So now it's just a matter of putting it all back together and buttoning it back up and mounting it back on the wall. You have to take the feet back off. Step 1 is I'm going to top this off just a little bit. It's gone down just a tiny bit after running a couple of hours. So you can, in one of the videos, you'll notice that this was right after I put the water in. There's so much air in here. This almost looks like a light blue-white color, but now it's nice and clear. You can see through it. And that's because it's settled out like it's supposed to. And this top tube, which I wanted to be just below the top, is exactly, almost exactly, 1/8 of an inch below the top, maybe a little more than 1/8 inch, 3/16. That should be perfect because the glass actually sits a little higher than the back end up here. So lift up just a little bit. So there you might be able to tell it's just a little bit below the top. That's just about dead even with the top of the system. And you can tell it's doing a nice job. Get a little closer, you can see now it's actually quite clear. All the air bubbles are out. This tube has a few irregularities in it. It's got a flat spot on one side right here, which I would like to get rid of, but this is a very tough tube to do. It's not leaking, it's doing what it needs to do. If I was an absolute perfectionist, I kind of am, I would probably try and make that tube again, except that one right there I think is the 3rd or 4th try that I already did. So, and it was hard to do, so it was a pain. What I would recommend is, I tried to reuse a piece, this is a very short tube, and I had several longer pieces of tubes that I had been using, including this one that ran across the top, so I thought I'd try to reuse it. That just didn't work for me. Apparently, either because of age or just wasn't working out for some reason or other. It was much better when this was my first try with a new piece of tubing that had never been used before. So either I just had more confidence that it was going to work, or it really works better. I'm not quite sure which. So step 1, top this off, put these fans back in, which means I have to run the cable back there and bring it back through here, hook them up to the fan headers on this side, then put on the back, and I think I'm good to go. Your friend, a magnetic tipped screwdriver. Imagine everybody who works with any hardware knows that by now. I guess I'll do these one at a time. There's the back plate, which I had shown on an earlier video, that the hard disks or even the SSDs could mount onto on the back if you had 3¼ or 3½ inch hard drives or 2½ inches SSDs mount to, is right behind this thing, so it's pretty much on the road. Okay. Just need to pass it through. Try not to catch this nice white sleeved cabling on things. Don't want to rip it. Okay. Also a useful screwdriver to have, short, because it fits in places where the other ones do not. Okay, these actually almost go in too easy until we get right to the very end. These are self-tapping metal screws. I'm putting it into a piece of sheet metal, which is really all the Thermaltake Core P5 is. It's just a nice big piece of painted sheet metal. Pretty much what all cases are. All right. Okay. Now just time to route some cords. Let's move the camera, shall we? I say we shall. Alrighty. So the cables on this side, this is where they come through the back. This is the metal bracket I was referring to. Got some mounting pieces here to mount them through. Got one up here, which is kind of hard to see. Got one up here, which is kind of hard to see. I've got some mounting brackets here and here. I need to go through here and attach to the motherboard just on the other side. So it's really just a matter of routing these cables through the cable management pieces that I put on. I used a couple different kinds too while I was at it, because that makes it fun. When I originally did this system, I only put one fan on. Now I have two. And when I hooked it up to the motherboard, I could only get one fan reading, and I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't control the fans independently. And it turns out that the connections I'm using on this motherboard are actually for a CPU cooler that has two fans. An air CPU cooler that has two fans, basically a Noctua. It's not what I have, but that's what I plugged it into, so because I wanted it to act as CPU fans. So if the system got hot, CPU gets hot, I want those fans to speed up. Life should be a lot cooler now that I've put this water block on the front. Okay, so these two connections here run through this little cable management holder fastener there. It actually has it listed here on the motherboard: CPU optional, CPU fan, all in one pump. At any rate, I wanted to see why I couldn't control the two fans separately, because they expect you to want to run the fans at the same speed because you're supposed to be using both of the fans for a CPU cooler. Yeah. So what I'm using are these Scotch mounting squares. It's supposed to hold up to a ½ pound. I think they hold up to a ½ ounce. At least they might hold up to a ½ pound for a very short while. I sure don't hold it very well for a long time. Basically, I pulled that off. And it just mounts on the back anyway. It's actually a lot more resistance than I realized. I didn't realize it was quite that. I don't know why. I have plenty of cable. Shouldn't be pushing that hard against me trying to do this. There we go. Get it level. Okay, that looks fairly nice. Okay, so now that I have this repositioned, now it's just a matter of taking my screws, mounting the system back on the back. I've got to mount the back itself, and then the TV mount. And take off the feet. Oops, I missed. Okay. I'm going to start with this one over here in this corner, because that's always the hardest one for some reason on this particular case to get started. It doesn't want to go in. So these are serious. And they are marked. Let's see, I think this is I know they're marked, I just don't remember where they are marked. This has an R on it. This is the right one. Thought that was the case. This is the left one. It's got an L on it. There are 4 screws that hold this in. These are not tiny screws. These are serious screws for holding up TVs. Oh, this system is heavier than almost any modern TV, so I guess that's probably warranted. Okay. I know I took a picture, but I still remember it's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes up from the bottom. That. So it's basically this. Get my finger out of my own road. And a washer. The washers hold it out a ½ inch. The bar that I mount this on just flush against the wall. These kind of clip on top of that, and this just holds it off another ½ inch or so. I wanted that because the radiators blow out here, radiator fans blow out here. I just wanted to have some nice room back here to let the air disperse. So like I said, it's heavy. It's not even an exaggeration. That thing is heavy. Can move it up a little bit. I actually don't mind if it sits on those feet because that's what they're made for. I will give them credit. They don't want these feet to fall off. 4 screws in each one, but then again, this thing's made to hold a lot of weight, so. All right, now I'm committed because I can no longer set it up. Believe it or not, and I'm not sure I do, I actually got that to clip onto the wall on the first try. That almost never happens. Now it's just a matter of putting on some plexiglass, yes. Plexiglass. There's also these cute little metal spacers. That's what I was talking about. The glass actually mounts into those. 2 of them here. I improvised a little bit. These things generally just kind of float, and I made it really hard to get the screws and things lined up, so I actually used the screws that came with this, which I didn't like, and replaced with black screws to basically hold these in place so I can get everything mounted. So. These 2 on the outside are just kind of tentative because this one I know goes all the way in. That I can't put a post on because this motherboard's fixed I/O shield is right up against this post. There's no clearance. So either the I/O shield wasn't designed properly or the case wasn't. One of those 2 things is causing me issues. There's a glass here, a glass here, and a glass here. The back is open and the bottom is open, so that's kind of general airflow through the case. I use these screws rather than the silver screws to mount them because they're much more in keeping with my theme. The trick is cleaning off your fingerprints once you get this system mounted. Not only are these nicer looking, they actually work a lot better too for whatever reason. They screw at it infinitely easier than the screws that came with it. And as I say that, of course, they're going to be difficult to screw in. These are M5 screws, and as I may have mentioned, I'm sure I did, Metric's nice in that it's very fine. You have very good fine gradation of everything, but I'll tell you, it's you can easily get one of these cockeyed and stripped. Not trying too hard. And I would rather not do that. I almost had that right. It goes back from the very front from being flush about maybe it's not even a 1/4 inch, 3/16 of an inch. I gotta take that glass off because of course I can't put it on backwards. The large rubber things are supposed to be on the inside, not the outside. I'll wait till I put this one on first. I think this was the top one. It looks pretty dusty. Yeah, this was the top one. It's definitely a little dustier than the other panel. There we go. All right. And this just sits on the rubber. Okay, I'm going to clean off that chrome that I just had my hands all over. Yeah. Now I think we're good to go. Now for the heavy piece. And if I'm really smart, I'll mount it the right way the first time. Which I will. Because, not because I'm really smart, but because I just made that mistake. It's got stuff all over it. Okay. And I'm using slightly different things for that. These are actually for cameras. What I need is to actually kind of have this one stuck through there so that I can lift this up and put it on all in kind of one motion. These screw on really nice. If you're going to have to do a panel this size by yourself, you might as well have something that makes the job a little easier. I think I paid $9 a piece for these things though, so they're actually for camera tripods. Replacement screws for camera tripods. And I bought 4, which was like the entire inventory that the person who was selling them had. So that's like, apparently they don't, there's replacement screws for tripods. You probably don't sell too many of these. I probably wonder what I was doing. What kind of business do I have where I messed up 4 tripods and need to replace all of the screws? Let's see what's going on. These, I should mention, these posts actually have a little bit of play too, so. Glass has some play, the posts have some play. Alrighty. Okay, back that off a little bit. I like to have the things facing up and down, so I actually tighten them all the way and then back them off just 1/2 turn or whatever it takes to make it have that look. Since these are all mounted on nice big pieces of rubber grommet, they don't vibrate or anything. Okay, well that's actually I think a little tighter than I usually do. Yeah, that's not going back. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Actually, I wasn't that tight. All right, everything's good, good, good. That was a little loose. The only thing I mount on this side is headphones for the occasional time where I actually have to listen on headphones. And now for the massive cables that I need to hook up on the back of this thing to make life good. That is, so I've got this entire sleeve full of cables to hook up. Okay, well, I have everything hooked back up. I think it's where it belongs. Now time for the moment of truth. Let's switch this guy to the... Oh, that's good. That's a good sign. That's good. Please enter the setup recovery of the BIOS setting. Why does it think I need to do that? Yeah, that's true about everything so far. F1 to run setup. At least it's not beeping that it's screaming at me. So F1 to run setup. I imagine I've lost my XMP settings, and yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, the usual stuff. But it's up and doing its thing. I need to reset XMP. That's pretty much the only thing I've been setting. I do have to rerun the speed daemon thing to have it go through and figure out what it wants to use for some of the settings. Let's look at monitor. CPU temperature 43. Motherboard temperature is 50, 39. It's really pretty high. It's lower than it was, but it's not much better. Okay, so CPU fan 1 was 975, that was a 1071. Those are those two fans, the two white fans. They're exactly the same speed, should be at least. This will not show me, I don't believe, it should be the water pump speed, which is almost maximum. I think 5,000 is maximum. See the core voltage. Oh my god, why has it got the core voltage up to that size? It's almost like it... What is it doing? Okay, so CPU core voltage should be about 1.2 something, maybe 1.3 something. It's got it back to 1.4, which was one of its horrible settings that it came with. I actually had backed it way off. Let's see how I did that. But it's got memory back to 1.2 volts at 2133. That's going to go to 1.35 volts at 3600. That explains why the CPU temperature is higher than I expected it to be, because the core voltage is way higher than it needs to be. I think 1.1 is what I had before. At this point, I'm going to declare the transplant a victory, except for red. I got to get rid of red. Make it the right color, but other than that, we're good to go. Well, if you've made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching the video. I'm sorry it took as long as it did to get done, but I hope you've learned something. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section, and I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Thanks.